Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: what is the Global South and how is Israel-Gaza war shaping its role? Extend the ceasefire in Gaza, but don't stop there. Fact or fiction, the propaganda war won't stop, even during a truce. Israel, Hamas raise concerns over lists of people to be freed, official. Commercial vessel and U.S. destroyer attacked off Yemen, says U.S. military. What is the Global South and how is Israel-Gaza war shaping its role? South China Morning Post. The Israel-Gaza war has prompted a rare occasion for countries in the Global South to share a common voice against the foreign policy of the U.S. and some Western powers. The Global South is a diverse group of post-colonial and developing countries that spans Latin America, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. Many countries in the Global South, particularly those with large Muslim, Orthodox Jewish, and Christian populations, are outraged by the perceived double standard of major North American and European countries regarding the conflict. They feel that major powers are not treating the attacks on civilian infrastructure in Gaza as war crimes or showing enough empathy for Palestinian lives. However, analysts believe that the Global South is unlikely to act as one due to its lack of defined leadership or structure. China, which has bolstered ties and influence with many countries in the Global South through its Belt and Road Initiative, has taken an opportunity to gain popularity among the grouping through its rhetoric. China has consistently called for an immediate ceasefire and sent a special envoy to the Middle East to urge de-escalation of the conflict. However, experts believe that China's influence to change the status quo in Gaza is limited, and the responsibility for de-escalation remains with the U.S. and the Biden administration. There is no clear division of views on the Israel-Gaza war between the Global South and the Global North, or the West. Countries in the Global South have different priorities and interests, which make it difficult for them to align their actions. The term Global South is loosely defined and lacks a solid definition or backing organization. While countries in the Global South may share some common perspectives, there is no conscious effort to align their positions on specific conflicts. Extend the ceasefire in Gaza, but don't stop there. Foreign Affairs. The Biden administration should prioritize extending the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza and work towards a comprehensive diplomatic process to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, according to an article in Foreign Affairs. The extension of the ceasefire could allow for the release of more hostages, reduce the risk of escalation, and address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. However, extending the ceasefire should be just the first step in a larger process that requires intensive U.S.-backed regional diplomacy and an overhaul of American policy. The United States should abandon its failed policy of facilitating direct, bilateral negotiations and instead convene a broader group of stakeholders to secure a comprehensive resolution of the conflict in accordance with international law. This would include ending Israeli control of Palestinian territories and ensuring the rights of Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. The United States should also reorient its policies, ending its practice of merely criticizing Israel's occupation and instead taking concrete steps to end it, such as reinstating legal guidance that settlements are inconsistent with international law. Furthermore, the United States should support a democratic process that would create a legitimate Palestinian leadership and stop blocking international organizations and discouraging other countries from recognizing Palestinian statehood. The Biden administration has the credibility and opportunity to push the Israeli government in the right direction and fulfill its promise to support Israel's long-term security. Fact or fiction, the propaganda war won't stop, even during a truce. Al Jazeera. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas is being fueled by anti-diplomacy, characterized by attacks on mediators and the spread of disinformation and propaganda. Israel is attempting to undermine Qatar's role as a mediator in peace negotiations by linking it to Hamas and discrediting its involvement. Israel's anti-diplomacy has even put it at odds with its closest ally, the U.S., which has expressed faith in Qatar's role as a mediator. The UN Special Rapporteur for the Occupied Palestinian Territories, Francesca Albanese, has also been targeted by a smear campaign, accusing her of violating the UN's code of conduct. She has emerged as a credible voice calling for peace and is seen as a threat to Israel's forces of anti-diplomacy. The ongoing conflict is also playing out on college campuses in the US and Europe, where there have been allegations of protests promoting anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinianism. Hamas will also be using propaganda to maintain support from its allies and generate sympathy for Palestinian suffering. The conflict is likely to continue as both sides seek to mobilize public opinion and maintain a level of bellicosity. Israel, Hamas raise concerns over lists of people to be freed, official. South China Morning Post. Israel and Hamas are raising concerns over the lists of hostages and prisoners due to be released today, the final day of the 4-day pause in fighting. Qatari mediators are working with both sides to resolve the issues and avoid delays. An Israeli official has reiterated that Israel would agree to an additional day of truce for each 10 hostages freed and would release 3 times the number of Palestinians each time. Hamas has said it wants to extend the truce and will try to find more hostages to release. The truce agreed last week is the first halt in fighting in the 7 weeks since Hamas attacked Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking about 240 hostages back into Gaza. In response, Israel has bombarded the enclave and mounted a ground offensive in the north. The death toll in Gaza is 14,800 and hundreds of thousands have been displaced. The European Union's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, said the truce was an important first step, but that far more would be needed to alleviate the situation. He also urged Israel not to recolonize Gaza. Commercial vessel and U.S. destroyer attacked off Yemen, says U.S. military. Financial Times. Missiles were fired from rebel-controlled territory in Yemen towards an Israeli-affiliated vessel and a U.S. naval destroyer, according to the U.S. military. The missiles landed several miles away from the commercial vessel Central Park in the Gulf of Aden and the USS Mason, which was responding to its distress call. The Houthi rebels who control swaths of Yemen had threatened to attack the Central Park if it did not alter course to the Yemeni port of Hodeidah. The incident comes amid growing tensions in shipping lanes around the Horn of Africa since Israel launched its war in Gaza last month. Talks to extend Israel-Hamas truce go down to the wire. Wall Street Journal. Egyptian and Qatari mediators are hopeful that a 4-day truce between Israel and Hamas can be extended, as they work to resolve a dispute over which hostages should be released by the militant group. The pause in fighting has allowed 39 Israelis to return to Israel, while 19 additional hostages have been freed under separate agreements. More than 14,800 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since Israel began its military campaign on October 7, while at least 70 Israeli soldiers have died. Talks are now underway to extend the truce deal by up to 4 days, with the potential release of more women and children hostages in exchange for more Palestinian prisoners and humanitarian aid. Biden is sending $100 million in aid into Gaza. Is any of it ending up in the hands of Hamas? Yahoo! The Biden administration has pledged $100 million in humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, much of which is being sent to Gaza to help alleviate the ongoing crisis triggered by the Israel-Hamas war. However, concerns remain about whether some of the aid could end up in the hands of Hamas, the militant group that governs Gaza and is designated as a terrorist organization by the U.S. The U.S. has seen no indication that Hamas has gotten its hands on the latest assistance that has entered Gaza, and inspections and other mitigation measures are in place to ensure that the aid reaches those who need it most. The U.S. has targeted individual Hamas leaders with sanctions but does not maintain sanctions on Gaza as a whole. The Biden administration has acknowledged the concerns about Hamas potentially diverting or stealing the aid, and President Biden has warned that assistance will be stopped if that happens. The aid being sent to Gaza is far from sufficient to meet the needs of the population, with the crisis described as close to catastrophic. The U.S. is working with partner organizations to deliver the aid and has taken precautions to prevent it from ending up in the hands of Hamas. However, some lawmakers remain concerned that Hamas could benefit from the aid. The Biden administration has said that the assistance is intended to help the Palestinians, not Hamas, and is focused on preventing people from dying. The U.S. has also pledged additional aid in response to a hostage release deal announced last week. Global shipping on edge after Israeli vessels seized. Deutsche Welle. Yemeni Houthis have seized a Japanese-operated cargo ship in the Red Sea, with armed men jumping onto its deck from a helicopter before hoisting Palestinian and Yemeni flags. The ship's operator, Japan's Nippon Yusen, said it had set up a task force to collect information on the 25-person crew, who are from the Philippines, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Romania and Mexico. The number of hijackings has been increasing in the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz and the Gulf of Oman, mainly due to U.S.-Iranian tensions and restrictions on the trade of Iranian oil. Israel-Gaza war, how Biden's approach is hurting America's reputation. South China Morning Post. The U.S. response to the recent conflict between Israel and Hamas could mark a significant milestone in the waning of America's influence, according to Robert G. Patman, an international relations specialist at the University of Otago. President Joe Biden's staunch support for Israel's military actions in Gaza has damaged America's international leadership and undermined its commitment to an international rules-based order. Furthermore, it has provided a strategic windfall for America's adversaries, including China, Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah, who have been able to criticize the US and position themselves as defenders of the Palestinians. These are some of the hostages Hamas released from Gaza. Washington Post. Hamas has released 58 hostages over the first 3 days of a planned 4-day pause in fighting with Israel. Both sides have expressed openness to extending the pause so they can exchange more hostages and prisoners. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest updates on the Israel-Gaza war and its impact on the global south. Today, we discussed how countries in the global south are sharing a common voice against the US and Western powers, China's influence in the region, the need for a comprehensive diplomatic process, the ongoing propaganda war, concerns over the release of hostages, attacks on commercial vessels, and the US's aid to Gaza. Now, let's dive into the analysis. The Israel-Gaza war has brought countries in the global south together in condemning the perceived double standard of major Western powers. However, the lack of defined leadership or structure makes it unlikely for the global south to act as one cohesive group. China, on the other hand, has used this opportunity to gain popularity among the global south through its rhetoric, but experts believe its influence to change the situation in Gaza is limited. Moving on, an article in Foreign Affairs suggests that the Biden administration should prioritize extending the ceasefire in Gaza and work towards a comprehensive diplomatic process to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This would require intensive US-backed regional diplomacy and a shift in American policy. The US should abandon its failed policy of facilitating direct, bilateral negotiations and instead convene a broader group of stakeholders to secure a comprehensive resolution in accordance with international law. On the other hand, the ongoing conflict is fueled by anti-diplomacy, characterized by attacks on mediators and the spread of disinformation and propaganda. Israel is attempting to undermine Qatar's role as a mediator, while targeting credible voices calling for peace. The conflict is also playing out on college campuses, with allegations of protests promoting anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinianism. Both sides are using propaganda to mobilize public opinion and maintain bellicosity. Concerns have been raised over the release of hostages and prisoners, as Israel and Hamas are raising concerns over the lists of people to be freed. Mediators are working to resolve the issues and avoid delays. However, tensions remain high, with missiles fired towards an Israeli-affiliated vessel and a U.S. naval destroyer in Yemen. The incident comes amid growing tensions in shipping lanes around the Horn of Africa. The Biden administration has pledged $100 million in humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, with concerns about the aid potentially ending up in the hands of Hamas. Precautions have been taken to ensure the aid reaches those who need it most, but some lawmakers remain concerned about Hamas benefiting from the aid. Meanwhile, Yemeni Houthis have seized a Japanese-operated cargo ship, adding to the growing number of hijackings in the region. Lastly, the U.S. response to the conflict has damaged America's international leadership and provided a strategic windfall for its adversaries, who have positioned themselves as defenders of the Palestinians. The release of hostages by Hamas during the pause in fighting shows openness from both sides to extend the pause and exchange more hostages and prisoners. And there you have it, my dear viewers. The Israel-Gaza war continues to shape the role of the global south, with different countries having different priorities and interests. The need for a comprehensive diplomatic process and a shift in American policy is crucial to resolving the conflict. The ongoing propaganda war, concerns over the release of hostages, and attacks on commercial vessels further complicate the situation. The Biden administration's aid to Gaza, while commendable, comes with concerns about it falling into the wrong hands. And finally, the U.S. response to the conflict has tarnished its reputation and provided an opportunity for its adversaries to criticize and position themselves as defenders of the Palestinians. Now, it's time for your thoughts. What do you make of the Global South's response to the conflict? Should the U.S. change its approach? And what about the ongoing propaganda war and concerns over the release of hostages? I'm eager to hear your perspectives and answer any questions you may have. Let the discussion begin. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.